Right, here we are on the fourth practical project. Now, at this point, I don't expect you to follow along perfectly the first time anymore. I think we've done this enough now for you to understand the general workflow and the general routine of doing this. I am completely okay with you just doing your own thing here and not watching these videos through, but I'm going to provide the walkthrough regardless, so if you want to check in and see what I'm doing, you can do. From this point onwards, we're entering intermediate advanced territory, and you don't need to stick to step-by-step demonstrations quite as strictly as we were doing before. At this point, I encourage you to do your own thing, to experiment, to find your own set of references and everything. But that being said, obviously, this is going to remain here just in case you want to see it. So this is a short film. It's a longish short film. It's about 8 minutes 46 seconds, so this is going to be the longest project that we've tackled so far. This is a full-length short film. In fact, there's a bit of an odd story behind it. This is the graduation project of a friend of mine who graduated 2018, right at the end of this year, actually, in the year in which this lecture was recorded. I graduated back in 2012. I've been doing this for a little over 6 years now, and this guy, he was a client of mine beforehand. He deferred his course, he went back later on and finished his course, and this was his project. It was shot on an Arri Alexa. It looks great. It's framed very nicely. It's put together very well. It's still basically being a student project. There are a few little flaws here or there, but it's actually a pretty good quality of student project, it has to be said. It's definitely a step up from when I was at where I graduated from. But then they've improved a lot over the years, as they always do. You go back, you look back at what you went through, and you think, it's better now. That's really frustrating. Back when I was in university, we had Sony XD cams, and now that same course is running with Reds and Arris. It's very frustrating for me to look back at what the other students have now. So, we're going to go through this. This is our first phase. It's our look development phase. Now, I've deliberately skipped out on the conform here, or the Baked Master workflow. This is a Baked Master project, and we've been through the Baked Master workflow enough for you to know how to do that now. There are issues with this one, which you have to solve, but you have everything you need to solve them. In particular, there are issues with the woodland scene here, and you'll see what those are when you run it through the auto scene detect. But you can deal with that now. I have every confidence that you know what you're doing there, and if not, you can always go back to the Baked Master workflow lectures at the start of this course. That's absolutely fine. But I'm not going to repeat that material like a third or a fourth time here. There's no point in that. So, this being a kind of a dark thriller, it's as far as I can tell, it's a story about a girl who's bullied to the point where I think she commits suicide and implicates her bullying friend right at the end of the film. That's what I think happens. I've never actually seen it with audio, which is quite common. This went back to the client, and then he put it all together for his graduation day, and he downplayed the fact that he hired a freelancer to finish his student project. Though students paying freelancers to finish off their projects is quite common. I'm sure you'll see it on Mandy and the like when you go out looking for grade projects. I certainly did at the start. So, this being a kind of a dark thriller, I've gone for very dark thrillers and police procedural type dramas. So, the first set here would be the Bron-Broen Bridge, or the bridge, outside of Scandinavia, wherever it's from. I don't know exactly which country the bridge is from. But the bridge is a masterpiece of creative grade. It has a fantastic atmosphere. It's really, really strong stuff, and it suits perfectly. That's a still from Luther, more on that in a second. And the whole thing just suits that kind of bleak, very edgy, very dark atmosphere perfectly, and there's a lot that we can take away from projects like The Bridge for this project. The second one is a BBC detective series called Luther. Now, Luther is very gritty and very dark. It stars Idris Elba, and British people like to think that everyone knows who Idris Elba is. British and Americans certainly will. Idris Elba's a very good actor. He's in a lot of stuff, and I don't think any of these stills actually feature him, funnily enough. But it's the same kind of, well, it's similar. It's more colourful and more vivid than The Bridge. There's a stronger emphasis on stronger blues, stronger yellow colours, just generally stronger colours, but it's still got the same kind of pale, edgy look to it. And the final is a series that I haven't actually watched myself. I've never seen True Detective, but I'm fully aware of the work that goes onto it, because it looks spectacular. Like, this is an excellent image. This is really, really good. These are really atmospheric, really powerful. They strike a very nice balance between having colours which are not completely washed out. So The Bridge is great. The colours are all very muted, and that works really well. True Detective deals with stronger colours but manages to maintain that same general atmosphere. It's a fantastic example of grading. And, of course, shooting that film, that series. Because, of course, the grade is only about half the work. It has to be good material captured as well. This is just fantastic. I love this shot. This shot is amazing. The indoor sequences, indoor scenes are always harder to deal with. This is quite a good reference for later on in the film. And we've got some urban nighttime as well, and then we've got a bit of woodland here. And we can try and work between these three references to come up with our look. So, I'm going to crack my knuckles. What I will do is I'm going to start with my kind of master shots here. I've put purple flags on the shots I'm going to develop looks on, which are the shots I feel best represent any given scene. And then at the end, where it goes full-on police procedural, this is a good setup. It doesn't quite look right and atmospheric, but believe me, we will get it there. The Arri Alexa 4x4 is really good source to work with. I love the Alexa. Alexa and Red Epic are my two favourite cameras to work with. I've worked with f55s and a little bit more recently of Varicam LT. I still think the Alexa and Red Epic are my two favourite cameras to work with. It has to be said I have a soft spot for Red. I just like Red cameras, but the Alexa is brilliant. I used to work with a lot of... from one particular client, I worked on a lot of ads and corporate spots shot on Arri Mirror, actually, which isn't quite as good, but it's still pretty good. Right, let's get on to it. So, this scene is quite important. This shot is quite important. It's mirrored again towards the end of the film. And we want to have quite a nice, powerful look. We want a bit of foreboding. We want to establish the mood as soon as we see the first image. It's not the kind of thing where it goes through and through and through and then, oh, this is a great big surprise at the end. We know right from the off that this is a dark story and we want there to be a dark feeling to it. So we're not going to work on having things transition from bright and bubbly and colourful all the way through to dark and muted and Scandinavian, I guess. If any Scandinavian people are offended by that, I do apologise. You do have some quite bleak entertainment media. So we're going to go for that kind of edgy look right from the start, and we're going to keep the whole thing edgy, the whole thing kind of dark and foreboding and brooding, and we're really going to try and sell that kind of atmosphere here. So let's start with our first reference, and I like this shot as a reference for this scene. One thing to take note of is that yes, we have output blanking here, not ideal, but that's how the client delivered this project to me. Always ask for baked masters without black bars or output blanking. That's really important because there are one or two places where this might end up causing problems with tracking vignettes and power windows. It's always ideal not to have the black bars, and if you have an external reference monitor, you never have black bars because that can knacker the monitor. That can significantly reduce the active lifespan of an expensive external reference monitor if you have output blanking on. I had an old PVM 2451A and I loved that monitor, and it got a dead pixel in like the first 4 months because every client just didn't listen. And then in the upper left where the black bars are, dead pixel, £4,500 monitor. So this is really important. You have to really hammer it home to clients, and you have to really make sure they understand the importance of that if you have access to an external reference monitor. If you're just grading with GUI, which is a graphical user interface, basically your standard user monitor, then that's not going to be a problem, although like I said, it can kind of get in the way of tracking. So it's really ideal for us not to have it. So here we have a kind of muted teal in our background. We have a strong contrast between this kind of steely green, blue, teal, and the very nice yellow colours here in the blonde hair. Now we've got a blonde actress and a kind of a cool background, so this is a really nice match. One of the things we need to watch out for here is this kind of wood in the background. So the first thing we're going to do is we're just going to get our general contrast in the right place, and I'm going to start with offset this time because I want everything to be quite down and dark, and you see we're already beginning to get that kind of the bridge look, Bromberone Bridge look. So what we're going to do now is we're going to bring up here. Now we don't just want to line up these top things here because this is natural light and it's a larger part of the image, and this is a little practical. It's okay for the practical to be that bright in this image when it's this dark because it's a very small focal point. In this image, obviously we've got quite a lot of natural light coming in from the side, so what we're not going to do is bring it up so that it matches like this, because then that's too bright and we immediately lose that atmosphere. So we're going to have to bring it down, and this is we're grading by eye until that's about done, and then we'll bring our shadows down. Just going to clip or crush a few little things down there. And then I'm just going to smooth this out. I'm just going to want to be careful. If you do corrections like this which are too harsh, you start to show up hard edges on the curve, which is not what you want. There we go. That's looking more like it. Now, of course, it's a bit purple. The framing on this, the DOP had really good framing, had almost non-existent color balance. Unfortunately, there are lots of color balance issues in here. This bedroom should not look purple, but it does. So there's all kinds of quite severe white balance issues throughout this project. This being 4x4 from an Arri Alexa, it's easy enough to correct, but it's still mildly frustrating. So what I'm going to do, I'm then just going to bring our saturation up a little bit. Probably going to bring this back down later, but I want to bring it up so that I know I get a good color balance. And then on my next node, I'm going to start dealing with this crazy color balancing. And you can see we're already beginning to get closer. If I were to bring that up and whack up the saturation, we're getting quite a nice neutrally balanced image there, but this being a depressing gritty horror project, or gritty thriller project, that's more like it. Okay, so we're now getting a little bit closer. It's on its way. We still have quite a bit of work to do, but we're getting there, and that it's kind of got the contrast, the distribution of contrast going on. There are a few things we need to prepare first before we go ahead and do the more kind of creative treatment. So the first thing is this lipstick. It being very saturated, it's actually very easy to isolate, and we're going to get this kind of troublesome stripe on the shirt, and we're just going to pull the color out of that. And we're going to do that because it's going to punch through other color adjustments that we make, and we don't want to have a very strong warm color. When we have a lot of kind of muted cool colors on the screen, a strong warm color is going to come through, and it's going to really draw the eye. We want to try and avoid that if possible, because this is a very muted, very Scandinavian. It's the only word I can think of. It's kind of the Scandinavian look, because it really reminds me of things like the bridge. Okay, this is looking good. I don't see any evidence of noise here. So the next thing would be this wood in the background. Again, it's a little bit bright and cheery, and that is not what we're going for. And we're just going to pull that down. Cool. Looks like there's a little bit of a fringe on it, so I might just expand that a little bit. There we go. Blur it out a bit more. Then I'm just going to check through for noise. Cool. So now we're getting a little bit closer. We're taking out kind of one-off warm colors. Now the next thing we're going to want to do is we're going to want to introduce that kind of cool grey steel color, and we're going to want to build up the contrast between our hair, our skin, and our background here. So we'll just see how well this does. It should be fairly easy. And I'm just going to push this a little bit towards yellow. Just a little bit, not too much, don't want it to look odd. Actually, let's undo that. I'm going to hold Alt and hit O, make an outside node. And now I'm going to tint the background a little bit green, so you can see what we're going for. Maybe it's a little bit closer to cyan. And then I'm going to kill the color. And you can see now we're getting that kind of steely look. There's a little bit of keying error in the hair, and she's beginning to look pink in contrast now. So what we will do, and let's just see what else we can do with the hair then, shall we? I have a feeling. There we go, and if I watch this through, there's no interfering noise. So now I can go to the back, and I'm doing a lot of serials, not very many parallels. I could group these together in parallels, or I could group them together in the case of this correction here. I could set this up with a layer mixer if I wanted to. Don't forget about those. In fact, these two would be serial, these two would be parallel with each other, and these two would be in a layer if you really wanted to organize like that. And now I'm just going to sort out my final contrast. And the last thing I'm going to do is I'm going to put a vignette on the right hand side of the screen, because that daylight is making things a little bit too bright and cheery for us. There we go. Now I might go back to the skin, just pull the colour down a little bit. There we are. Excellent, and there we have a look informed by the bridge. You can see the cues I've taken here, the kind of green, steely teal look in the background, the nice yellow hair, and that general kind of distribution of contrast. And now, this very first shot, we can see she's making herself up, but there's obviously something not right here. Like if this was just a normal sunny day when someone had woken up and applied their lipstick, that would be absolutely great, but clearly this gives us, we can feel upon seeing this that there's something not quite right, there's something foreboding going on here, and that's precisely what we're aiming for. That's our goal with this grade, is to kind of inform the viewer of the atmosphere. Because when we get here, things get really dark, and we're going to want it to look that way. We don't want it to look, this is quite bright and clean, we don't want that. We want it to look quite dark and quite foreboding. And, 4x4 from an Alexa is just fantastic stuff to work with. It really is. It's a very close second to red for me. I just do have a weakness for red footage. Right, I'm pretty happy with that. This is quite an in-depth look development. I've had 20 minutes on this already, but what I'm not gonna do this time is go through and make like 2 or 3 different looks for each one. I've got a fairly solid idea of what I'm doing. The client gave me a lot of leeway, and the client would pretty much accept whatever I gave to them at this point. They're not giving me a lot of direction. In fact, the actual briefing I got for this project was that the director really liked 7. And that was it. So I had quite a lot of leeway. My original grade for this was quite different. It was more traditional, starting bright, going darker. I didn't quite think that best suited the story, but, win some, lose some. Right, our next one's going to be here. And if you feel like you've gotten the logic behind all of this, by the way, go ahead and just do your own thing now. I'm just going to provide all of this here so that people who want to see how I work can do. This one's going to be the longest project we've done. It's probably going to be a good 6 hours or so. So we're going to try and keep going. Right, so this one is still going for this kind of a look. Maybe like this, maybe we've actually got some shots on a bus. which aren't going to be exactly like this, because obviously this was shot at night, this was shot during the day. But that's fine. So we can go back and we can use our kind of steely teal look here. Now we have little dots of practical in the background, so we can bring them up quite high, and then we can bring the mids right down. Right down. And we can try and get our nice kind of moody look going on. That's still looking a little bit bright to me, actually. I might just bring those highlights down a smidge. There we go. Here we have our magenta color balance. As good as this DOP was in framing, I don't know what was going on with the color balance. I don't think they used a monitor on shoot. Okay, so this is good. It's not too artificially dark. We're not losing detail. When we're grading like this, it's very easy to crush detail in the blacks, and we want to avoid that if at all possible. I don't want this brown hair here to be like a big kind of ink blot on the screen. So, next one. I'm just going to whack up the saturation so I can see what I'm dealing with. And now in our next one, we are going to deal with our color balance. You know the routine by now. Now what I want to be careful of, these walls are actually a kind of steely shade of blue already, which helps us out. What I want to be careful of is those walls are not grey. So if I make them grey, you know, everything's going to be too warm otherwise, which I want to avoid. Because we're still going for the kind of basic cool warm color contrast. The cool warm color contrast is something that we use a lot of in the grade. You must have realized by now, and that's just because it works so well. Right. Excellent. Okay, that's pretty good for neutral. Now that's actually quite a long way towards getting there by itself. I might actually just bring the highlights up a smidge here, get a bit more detail, and then contrast that with the mids. There we go. Maybe just down a little bit. There's a lot of this kind of back and forth when you're developing a look. Okay, I think that's pretty much ideal contrast, and that's looking pretty good. Now, a lot of our work is done for us already, choosing this look. What I'm going to do, I'll set up some parallels this time. Just make sure these bright red lips don't get too distracting. And we are okay with this because that's a little red stripe on the shirt. Excellent, right, and then we're just going to bring the colour out of that a little bit. Not going to make it artificial, she's not goth, also not a cartoon character. So, just so it fits in with the rest of the image so it doesn't stand out too much. And that's pretty good going. Now there's nothing else in here that really stands out and that really needs attention before we go into our skin key. So I'm going to get rid of that node, I'm going to get rid of that parallel because there's no point. So the next thing I can then do, I can set up a layer mixer because I know what I'm doing. And I'm going to set up my skin key, and this can be quite difficult, although I say that. I want to try and get rid of those lights. I want to try and get rid of some of that noise. And this is a difficult one. We'll see how far we can get without having to resort to roto. Tell you what I'll do, Matte Finesse, I'm going to go to opening, radius 1. Okay, right, let's go back and see how well this works, because I've got a slight concern about the hair here. However, what we can do is we can easily pull a key that's just taking in the shadows, and we can then stamp that out of the background if that becomes a problem. So here we have our skin. Let's do our background first, because the contrast between the two colours is going to have an effect on how we perceive the skin tone. And let's get our reference image back again, so it's definitely green. Okay, let's take a slightly different approach here. Let's take what is already blue and rotate it and see what we get. Okay, that's not okay because it gets the shirt there and it turns out weird, so instead let's just see what we can get with the highlights here. Okay, that's beginning to get there. It might be a little bit bright, but we'll tell you what we'll do first. We'll sort out the skin. We'll push it a little bit more towards yellow. Because it was looking a little bit pink. Now there's little bits of pink and magenta in the skin, which is not unusual, so what we'll do, we'll just get hold of those. We'll just make sure that they fit in a little bit more, and we might just bring that up slightly. Okay, let's play around with our contrast. It's still looking quite bright. There's something about the skin there that doesn't strike me as quite right. I'm okay with the background, I'm okay with all the other colours. This skin being a little bit of a problem. Let's just... No, I somehow doubt that's going to fix it. That is not the way to go. Right, let's just check for noise. Let's just keep an eye out on the hair down here. Okay, that looks pretty nice and stable to me. We can tweak that, we can come back to it later on, but that's for look development, that's alright. It's been half an hour, so I'm going to save. And now I've just got a few more shots to go. I think I've just actually got 2 more shots to go. Quite a long look development phase, but then it's a much longer project. And so whilst we're going, there are looks based on the locations. It's still going together. What's so easy to do, especially for beginners, is to build a totally different look for every scene, and that's not how we do it, because then in the space of an edit, oh look, everything's different, the atmosphere is different, the style is different. There's a lot of skill in keeping to a style when doing this, and keeping to a kind of a coherent look. And if you look at True Detective, whilst this is a different time of day and a different location, the atmosphere is still very much the same. It's very, very well done, this show. That's kind of a bleach bypass as far as I can tell. But looking through all of these, you get a similar atmosphere, even though the looks are different. And that's not to say that every single thing has to be identical, but you just need to get that feel coherent throughout. And there's a lot of skill in doing that, which comes in due time. Now that I've seen that skin again, it looks a little bit too saturated. Let's just bring it down to about 52. Okay, cool. Right, that's it. No more fiddling on that one. We've now got the woodland one, and we've got a few nice references. This is very good. It's a lot like The Discovery, if you've seen that on Netflix. We can go for this. We can go for this. Look, this is brighter. This is more of an autumn time thing. There's lots of, well, it's definitely winter. There's lots of bare trees and autumn and everything. Well, winter, not autumn. Get my seasons right. And here, maybe this one's probably the strongest fit given the setup, but it's not my favourite. I'm going to take a look at the bridge and True Detective, I think, for this shot. In fact, because we're going with the whole kind of steely teal thing, I think it's going to give us a nice coherent sense of style. If we also go for a cool look out here as well. If we suddenly went for this, then, you know, or suddenly went for this, it's much brighter and clearer. I think that's a graveyard, that location. Oh no, it's not. There's a water slide in the background. There's never a water slide in a graveyard. My mistake. I don't know what's going on there. I assume that's a water slide. Anyway, back to work. So I'm going to go for the bridge and True Detective. I'm going to start off with this one, see how far that gets us. I have a feeling this is going to be a good one. Right. Same old, same old. I want to be careful of getting shadows which are a little bit too stark back here. So I'm going to bring my highlights up but my mids down. And I'm just going to make the bottom part just touch the graph. I'm not going to go crazy. And then we can... purple white balance strikes again. Okay, our lighting is different and we have, I think, less diffuse lighting. This looks like quite a diffuse light shot, probably an overcast day. This was shot in a British woodland, and British woodlands, I think I've said this before, are horrible filming locations because we get lots of thin, scrubby, branchy trees, and you just get basically a giant naturally occurring diffraction grating up above you, and everything's very diffuse and it's not very detailed. The background's a bit of a blur. It's not very good. I don't like British woodland for filming locations. So we're beginning to get there. Of course, we're now very, very purple, so we're going to have to deal with that first. Right, time to deal with this purple. So, let's start doing that. Let's add a little bit more warmth back into our image. It's a very pale, odd-looking image to begin with. The natural lighting in woodland is not fantastic, but that's pretty good. For a starting point, anyway. Cool. Now we have some very, very green bits in the background here I'm going to want to take care of. There we go. They're not going to be black and white, but they're not going to scream out either, because if they're very colourful and we're going for quite a muted look, they can interfere. Right, so let's go back to our look. So we're basically pulling down the saturation and adding a steely blue tint, and we're keeping the skin more or less the same. I think this might be a case for a parallel node with our skin correction, actually. So what I will do, I'll set up a parallel node. Now with parallel nodes, of course, the order in which you do things doesn't matter. It all resolves simultaneously. This time... That's just my phone. Right, let's get on with this. Let's finish this off. Yeah, I've got quite a lot of blue in the skin tones there, which is not ideal, but we can work with that. It's also very difficult to get a decent skin key in the woodlands because wood is a very close analogue to human skin in terms of hue and saturation. So let's go back now, and what we're looking for is this kind of feel. So it is quite blue and steely. It's also quite desaturated. And the skin kind of punches through that with a bit of magenta, bit of warmth. Okay, the skin key is really bad on the hair, fair enough. Perhaps try and make that a very subtle adjustment, I think. Okay, there's just a little bit more colour in the skin. Let's see if we can make that work. I just have to blur it right out because it's quite a... We'll put that on closing. That's a very messy key, that's not ideal at all. So but because it's so diffuse and because we're using parallel and it all mixes in, though you can still kind of see another get a bit more contrast in there. Okay, we're going to have to widen that. Okay, that's looking reasonably close. Right, let's just watch that through for noise. Big part of the hair there that's not in the key, of course. Well, that's not going to win any prizes for being hyper-specific, but it gets our look there, and we can't see any noise or artifacts. Cool. It's not always possible to get the key you want, so we've just had to work with what we can pull. We've taken influences from this. We couldn't get a skin key that clean, not in this environment, not with all the wood in the background, but we've still got something which is deliverable, I think. We might come back to that one later on. And now, the final purple flag shot, I think. Let's just take a look. Excellent. This is the last one, and this is the final scene. This is where the police are confronting our main character about the crime that they believe she committed, although she's innocent, I think. And this is going back to this kind of look again. Yeah, okay, we could choose to set this at night. We'd have to deal with that, but we could make it kind of a day for night here. This is midday though, or in fact it's 9:30 in the morning. So we won't do that, but there's a possibility of doing that if we wanted to. Instead, we're going to go back to the kind of steely, teal, blue, moody look that we've been using throughout. And this set of shots is fairly easy to work with, because it's quite nice controlled environment. There's a little bit of daylight spill back there, but nothing too serious. That's fine. So we'll come back to our favourite reference shot again. And surprise, surprise, we're purple again. And dealing with that purple cast is quite easily done. Just need to add a little touch more green. Bring it back a little more. There we go, that's a fairly easy neutral image. So we've got a good starting point now, and then what we're going to do, go back to our reference, and we're just going to take care of any particularly strong colours. And right now I see the purple and the red, the purple jumper and the red tie. There we go. Easy. Just take that down a bit, and then this red tie. Needs a bit more effort to key out, but still relatively simple. hits the lips a little bit as well, but we'll see how that goes. It might not be too much of a problem. That looks fine. Cool. So we can now go ahead, and what we can do now is we can set up our mask and our skin key. Just keep this all organized up here. And that's very easy. It is very easy on this shot. We're not going to worry about any interference from the watermarking, because on a real world project that wouldn't be there. So don't worry too much if that's beginning to get in the way. And now what we're going to do, yeah, we need to bring this down a little bit, but that's fine. We're just going to get this nice green teal colour back here. And I'm going to bring the colour down. And now we've got that kind of steely green look, and then just need to be careful not to lose too much detail in this black jacket here. And tell you what I'll do, I'm going to use the log wheels on this one. I'm just going to tease out a little bit of highlight detail. There we go. Now the skin's looking a little bit magenta, and it will do when it's contrasted against green. So we're just going to bring a little bit of green into the skin, and we're going to kill the colour ever so slightly. Now that's fine, they all fit in. It's not as clean a separation as we've had in other kind of colour contrast looks, but that gives us something inspired by the bridge. In fact, we might just go back, we might just sort this out a little bit. Maybe it's a touch on the green side. There we go. That's more like it. Let's just watch that through, keep an eye out for noise. This is our last look development shot. We've spent a long time look developing this time. What you'll probably find is because of this, our first pass takes place fairly quickly. We can set up groups, we can copy and paste looks along. But this time around we haven't done several different looks for everything. We've made some quite detailed stuff and then we'll go ahead. Which does happen on some projects. That pink's alright. It's meant to draw attention, and it contrasts quite nicely with everything else. And I'm quite happy with that for a final look in the final sequence. And when you consider this is just one of the lecture rooms in the university, that now does look a lot more atmospheric. We might just bring it down a little bit more, really get that kind of moodiness to it. There we go. Tell you what I might just do is I might just bring some more colour out of the skin. There we go. Now there's a little thing on her chin here, on the main lead's chin. There's a kind of like a bit of redness, a little bit of dark redness there, which kind of draws my eye and it's kind of annoying me, so I'm going to see if I can take care of that. No, I can't do anything about that without hitting the others. That's fine, just have to deal with that. Everything else looks good. Cool. Right, so this is the end of our look development phase. It's quite an intensive one this time, but we've got ourselves in very good stead for the rest of the project. We have strong looks to reference, we have our kind of master shots sorted, and our scenes in order. There's a bit more work to do here. We haven't done any LD here, but that'll be fine. We can work on that when we get to it. Depending on how this works out, I might come back to this and work on it again. It wasn't the best look. Actually, darkening it down does help it out a bit. That wasn't the best look I did, and it didn't respond well to the key, so it could well be a different approach is warranted here. We'll see during the grade proper if we have to do that. And then we've got our Bronbrowen look here. Might be a little bit dark now that I come back to it. There we go, keeping that kind of bleak look. And then we've got our first shot here, which I really like this one. I might now just bring it down even more. Just a little bit, there we go. Excellent. Right, so now I'm finished with the LD. We'll get started with the first pass in the next lecture, so click on through once you're ready.